Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the 8th of March of the Governance and Audit Committee. And for the female members, can I also wish you all a very happy Women's International Day and hope you're enjoying your day. If we could turn to the agenda first for apologies for absence.
Apologies from Councillors David Helliwell, Terry Hennigan and Clive Lloyd.
Move to agenda item 2, any disclosures of interests, please. Julie?
Yes, I'd like to disclose an interest in item 6 as previous employee authority.
It's a personal interest then, yeah?
Yes.
Thank you. Any further declarations? No? Okay. If we can move to the minutes then, I'll take it page by page for accuracy. And if I could have some hands then, if everyone is satisfied that they're an accurate reflection. So if we go to page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5.
Sorry, Chair, could I ask for a slight amendment to page 4, 4.6? It accurately records the letter of what I said, not the spirit of what I meant. So could, as opposed to, be amended to in addition to?
You're breaking up a bit there. Did you catch that?
No,
no. You're breaking up. Can you put on the chat to Jeremy what the amendment is for that?
Of course.
Because you're breaking up. I'm not quite sure what paragraph that is.
Okay.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Julie. Page 6, page 7, and page 8. Aside from that one amendment that Julie's going to notify that Jeremy needs to action, can I have a show of hands if you're satisfied that that's accurate set of minutes, please? Thank you, Paxton. Thank you, Oliver. Mike, and I see a few other hands up there. Thank you very much. Those minutes are approved. The first main item on the agenda then is the draft internal audit plan for 1922-23. And I welcome our Chief Internal Auditor, Simon Coppings, to present this report. If I could just say at the outset, the report contains the programme of work for 22-23. At the moment, it's not giving any indication of the scope of those individual assignments. But when it comes back in its final form in April for us to approve, it will have the detail of the scope of those individual reviews. So my great thanks to Simon for adding the scopes in, because it enables the Governance and Audit Committee members to have a full opportunity to consider what's been proposed for 22-23. So I could welcome Simon to take us through the report, picking up the points you wish us to note, Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. As the Chair has just mentioned, this is the work plan as a draft version for 22-23 for the audit team. The main aim is to get a broad coverage across the Council to inform my opinion at the end of year for next year. The draft plan as it is in Appendix 1 and 2 was presented to CMT and approved by CMT on the 23rd of February. So as it stands, we're planning to have the same level of resource in the team next year as we have this year. So that remains unchanged. And as you'll have in the Q4 report in due course, some of the reviews for this year's plan had to be deferred and have been included in next year's plan. So there was a marked with an asterisk in the actual plan itself. So basically the report just gives you some background to that, and then the appendices are the main part of the report. So Appendix 1 is a summary breakdown of the days across the different areas of the authority, and then the Appendix 2 is the more detailed summary list of the planned reviews to be undertaken in 22-23. So yeah, and I hope you've had a chance to look through them. As the Chair mentioned, the next report that comes to you in April will have a more detailed plan, essentially, with the scope of those reviews. So this is just for an initial discussion and suggested amendments at this stage, with the final plan coming for approval in April to the committee. So I'm happy to take any questions from any members.
Thank you, Simon. Any questions from members? Julie Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Simon, this may seem like a point of presentation, but I think it's important to elevate the risk management review, the cross-cutting reviews from service level areas to minimise the risk of it becoming a review just of the risk management framework and risk management team.
Sorry, Julie, I'm struggling to hear a lot of what you were saying there. Is it possible we could take it outside of the meeting, Julie? Is that something? Because I think there's definitely a problem with your line at the moment.
Okay, perhaps I'll try logging out and coming back in.
I think what Julie's mentioned is that she wants a higher profile of the risk management review cross-cutting, so it has the proper focus and not just a limited review in certain areas of the risk management framework. That's what I picked up from that.
Yes, yeah.
Chair, I think part of the
Chair,
problem is you're getting an echo on
Chair,
your
can I just
microphone.
interrupt a minute? I think it's better when your mic is also
Yeah.
on. I think that also
Yeah.
creates an echo.
Yeah, I agree with Leslie. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to pick up on that then, Julie, if I'm understanding the query correctly, as it stands, we've got a risk management audit, which is done on an annual basis. That currently comes under comms and marketing. That is quite a cutting audit as it stands, actually. So I'm happy to move that one from that area and put it back into the tier 1 reviews, which does give it a bit more of an overarching sort of approach, really. It won't really change the scope of the review because we do look at each directorate on an annual basis, but to highlight the importance, we're happy to move that from the service area audits up to the cross-cutting, if that would be fine.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Simon. And my second point is that I realise this is a draft plan, but can you, for the final plan, reevaluate the relative assurance that you get from the different reviews? Because I noticed that a couple of new reviews, like Achieving Better Together and Regional Working, are allocated 15 and 10 days respectively, but Swansea Market has been allocated 20 days. So I think perhaps you could revisit the relative importance of the different reviews, but bearing in mind that you need to have coverage across the whole authority.
That's the difficulty, Julie, trying to balance the resource to the number of audits and the breadth and the scope of the reviews. I'm happy to go back and maybe look at those again and maybe increase some of those budgets and take a better look at the historical trends, because things have obviously changed over the years in terms of the budget allocations. But yeah, I'll happily go back and reconsider some of those budgets, Julie.
Thank you.
Councillor Jennifer Rayner.
Thank you, Chair. On the same theme, really, the draft is a mixture of forward-looking and catch-up work. And I do wonder whether, as you said, your staffing complement will remain the same. Are you confident that you have sufficient staff and backup in order to be able to complete all the reviews?
I'm hoping so, Councillor Rayner. That's usually the plan. We tend to try and budget to the maximum. Obviously, there is some contingency built into the plan for things that crop up in year, like investigations or ad hoc pieces of work. So there are a number of days that are there for contingency. I think it's about 35 days in total. But yeah, this is very sort of challenging plan, should we say. The ones that we've included in this year from previous year are those that have been evaluated and risk assessed to be required to be completed. Normally they're ones that would have been deferred previously, or maybe high risk, or a lot of transactions that would go through the systems. So they've only been included here where we consider them to be necessary. But yeah, I'm hoping, given the current staffing arrangements, we would be able to complete most of this plan. We are seeing an improvement on last year's completion rate. Obviously, last year was a very challenging year for everybody, and this year hopefully will be a bit better in terms of the end of year stats at the end of March. And fingers crossed and touch wood, things are getting a bit back to normal, and we will be able to do more again this year, next year. Sorry. So I'm hoping it's achievable, but it will be challenging. Yes, Councillor Rayner.
Thank you. Perhaps you could update the group as you go through the year then. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No more hands up. Thank you for that, Simon. It's good to have early sight of your draft thoughts, and I'm sure when we get the April report, when we've got scope involved, we may have some more comments for you to consider before it's finalised in total. If we can move on then to the next agenda item, which is also yours, which gives us an indication of your methodology and your approach. So again, if I can ask you to take members through this report, please.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Maybe this could have come before the plan report. It might have been a bit more sense to have it the other way around, but it doesn't make any difference. This just gives members a bit of an overview, really, of how we go about putting the plan together generally. So, for example, we have a rolling programme of audits that are risk assessed and have a risk score. So, as you can see in 2.7, the risk scores are from 0 to 50, with 50 being the highest, and either done on an annual or biannual basis. So that gives us then a rolling programme of audits, normally over a 3 or 4 year cycle. In addition to that, we obviously have the fundamental reviews, which are classed as key systems. So those are done either on an annual basis or a biannual basis if they've had a 3-year consecutive high assurance rating. So those that have had 3 consecutive years are done on a 2-yearly basis, and all others are on an annual. If they drop down to a substantial level of assurance, then they start back to being on an annual basis again until they creep back up to the 3-yearly cycle. We do have grant certifications that come in the year. Most of them are planned, but we do have 1 or 2 that are dropped on our laps mid-year, which need certification. So hence there's contingency in the plan to account for those. In terms of the planning process, we held a consultation exercise with all heads of service and directors. That started in October 2021. So that process involves me sending out a complete list of all reviews that we have listed for those directorates and those heads of service to check for updates and to add things into the plan where they seem necessary, which is why you see a number of new audits on the plan for this year and in the overall universe of audits. We also look at the corporate risk registers. In part of the planning process, I review the corporate and directorate level risks to ensure that wherever possible, those are covered off with either current reviews in the cycle or there are new audits added in to cover off those key risks. Also, as part of the planning process, we look at updating the assurance map. That's sent out to all risk owners in October, November as well for update, and that is included as an appendix in the report. So basically that's the cycle. I've included in Appendix 1 some guidance from the public sector standards, because obviously the standards stipulate that we have to have a risk-based plan which covers enough scope for the annual audit opinion on an annual basis. So there's an appendix and insert there to cover off that legislation. And then the assurance map in Appendix 4, which you're all quite familiar with and seen in the past, which has been updated, I think is as of February, I believe. So just some background really in terms of how we go about putting the plan together. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for Jeremy on that report? Julie Davis.
Thanks, Chair. Simon, I've got a couple of questions. The first one is on Appendix 2. I'm looking at the planning process inputs, and I'm wondering whether you do any horizon scanning or look at external review reports to help inform your planning process, for example, Audit Wales or the Care Inspectorate or Estin.
We do ask the heads of service and directors and CMT to have sight of those, and ask us to include everything in there that they feel necessary as part of the consultation process. So that really comes from the consultation process, Julie, rather than direct review of the reports. As you'd expect, Dave in social services would have more understanding and knowledge of the Care Inspectorate reports. So you would ask them to feed that there through the consultation exercise.
Thank you. And my next question is in relation to Appendix 3. The corporate priority, safeguarding people from harm, is mapped against social services, but I think we need to be aware that it is a corporate responsibility, not just social services. So I would like to see safeguarding included in audits wider than the limited scope of social services, if that's okay.
Yeah, what we've tried to do there, Julie, I think as part of the original planning process, I think it was like last year or year before, we did ask heads of service and directors to try and map their services to a particular corporate objective. And obviously it's very difficult because they are cross-cutting and they do cross a number of different areas. So as you'll see in the actual plan itself, in the first report, some of the audits are cross-cutting across different corporate priorities. They aren't mapped specifically to one. We just tried to do a sort of a diagrammatic representation of it for that purpose. So yeah, I completely agree. They do cross across a number of areas. The safeguarding order that we do does currently sit within social services, but that does cover the whole of the organisation, not just social services. So even though it comes under that area, it is a broader review of the whole council safeguarding arrangements.
Okay, thank you. And my final question is in relation to Appendix 4. The sources of assurance, they're mapped against corporate risks, but looking at the first level of assurance, the management level, some of them look like mitigating actions rather than assurance. So I'm wondering whether that can be revisited during the year to ensure that we are mapping assurance.
Yeah, as I mentioned, Julie, the actual map itself is updated by the corporate risk owners, and you will see some duplication in this from the risk registers. So that's possibly where there's maybe some confusion there. And I'm happy to take this back to CMT and risk owners to ask them to update, mid-year to make sure they are actually mitigating controls and assurance as opposed to risks, essentially.
Yeah, and it might be worth considering broadening the scope of the document to consider business as usual risks. For example, looking at finance and personnel and ensuring that that there is assurance over each of those categories.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to feed that back to CMT, Julie. If that can be minuted, Jeremy, in the minutes, and I'll feed that back to CMT.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jennifer Rayner.
Thank you. In line with a question that's already been highlighted, Appendix 3, this is the problem of cross-cutting exercises. We've got tackling poverty, which again is supposed to be one of our key overarching objectives, and yet it's linked to commissioning and tackling poverty. Commissioning always sounds a bit arm's lengthy. Housing and public health. Well, neither of those two are going to make huge inroads into tackling poverty. So again, I wonder how we actually look at that on a wider basis. Because like safeguarding, it is supposed to be the responsibility of all departments to be doing something to tackle poverty.
Yeah, I think, sorry, Jennifer, I think the issue that we've got here, when this diagram was originally put together, it was the first time for us to try and map the actual corporate priorities in the plan. If members remember from a couple of years ago, we weren't actually undertaking that exercise 3 or 4 years ago, and we were asked to try and build it in more directly with the audit plan itself. So as you see in the appendix 2 for report 1, the corporate priorities are mapped across different areas. I think it's just maybe a bit misleading from this diagram, which might need to be updated to show that there are cross-cutting corporate priorities across different areas, not just the ones that are listed there, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
If I could come in there as well, I mean, the paragraph 2.14 states that there is a link between the plan and the objectives of the council. And that's something we asked Simon to consider going back, as Simon mentions, 4 or 5 years almost ago now. So this is a big development really to make sure the plan is risk-based, is aligned to the objectives. The presentation to display that is sometimes quite difficult. And I think when we see the scopes of the individual reviews, we have that level of assurance that we will see it's wider than where it's linked in the boxes on that Appendix 3, because I'm very minded that we've seen concerns expressed at the committee around DBS check-in, and that's not just been aligned to safeguarding, it's been cutting across right through to the road services, highways, and all those other areas where there's contact with the public in any shape or form. So I think, there is evidence that that is happening, but sometimes it's difficult to illustrate that. I think that's a fair observation for you, Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. If I could just pick up on that, I think the main purpose of the diagram as well, from my perspective, was to try and show the link between the objectives, the audit areas, and then how that feeds into the annual audit opinion, which you can see on the right-hand side, and then how that feeds into the governance statement, and then the wider statement of accounts. So yeah, I appreciate some of the mappings of the corporate bodies may be a little bit out of sync essentially, and they do cross areas, but there was a wider purpose of the diagram to show the linkage of the whole thing together. But I'm happy to take the comments on board, and obviously either review the linkages and update the diagram in due course.
Thank you, Simon. Ben Smith.
And on that point, because I hear what committee is saying, I think, Simon, it might be appropriate just to take those first set of solid black lines out, because by taking those lines out, it still hints as to where it is where the key owners are in the first instance, but it's probably a little bit misleading because it makes it look like it's a bit too one-dimensionally mapped. And I think that in itself may just automatically stop people assuming that you're mapping it one-to-one there. I think it still sits in the right sort of order of area because it gives a hint as to where the lead is, because you've got to map it to someone to take the lead on it. But that might be just a way of solving it, because these schematic diagrams always do attempt to paint a continuum, but there's always a danger it'll be seen to be more specific than it is. I just wonder if that's a suggestion. It's very cosmetic, but I think it automatically takes away the presumption that otherwise looks to purport to map it directly only to one area, when almost all of them overlap in the same way. The ones that are for mine for Section 151 assurance are mapped predominantly to finance, but the reality is I only get assurance when you do it across the continuum. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Leslie Walton.
Yeah, just partly echo what Ben has just said. Maybe could there be a line at the top of the page that actually does make it clear that these things they don't neatly map, do they, necessarily from one place to another? Life doesn't work like that. So it might be worth having a sort of covering sentence to explain this is maybe the lead, but not necessarily inextricably linked. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more hands up, so if we're happy to note that, and again, we welcome the plan when it comes back to the April meeting. So thank you, Simon.
Great, thanks, Chair. Thanks both.
If we can move on to agenda item 6, which is the absent management audit report. And I believe Adrian Child is going to present this paper.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is the report submitted on behalf of both myself and Sean Williams, who's the head of the service centre. Unfortunately, Sean can't attend this meeting this afternoon. So this report is really to provide you an update of progress with regard to the measures that were put in place following a previous audit. There is a follow-up audit to take place this quarter. This month, I believe, with regard to a further audit of management of absence provisions. But this report provides an update as of this month in respect to the measures that have taken place to move forward on the management of sickness absence. And you can see from the report that in terms of the progress, we continue to develop via the Oracle Fusion project a number of opportunities to manage and govern sickness absence management through the provision of a manager dashboard that's being developed and almost ready for user acceptance testing. The service centre continue to provide monthly reminders to managers in respect of sickness absence management and the provision of additional training, and also the development of the learning module in Fusion will provide an opportunity for better reporting to ensure compliance in respect of mandatory sickness management training. We, as a service centre and as a HR function, encourage the completion of return to work and record of action meetings, and there's continued improvement in that from the information I've received. In recent months, we have appointed management of absence advisors to support in the key areas where sickness absences are highest in the service areas in education, place and the social service directorates. And their role is proactive in many respects in trying to support managers in identifying sickness before it happens, so to speak, but also there are specific activities that are key to the respective service areas that they're focused on supporting. So, for example, in social services, there are issues around progressing long-term sickness cases of over 6 months, and that's where the sickness, the management of absence advisor is concentrating her time in supporting managers in managing sickness in those particular areas. Those roles also are developing and building on links with occupational health to ensure that occupational health provision and appointments are progressed as quickly as possible. Social services are also providing clinics to staff to support the mitigation of waiting times between referrals and appointments in relation to occupational health. Also, in conjunction with trade unions, we are providing updated guidance to support staff under our Dying to Work Charter, which is a charter to support those staff who are suffering from terminal illness, to enable them to continue working should they wish to. And then also in terms of stress and coronavirus related absences, we are seeing a decrease in those areas, but again, those are areas that we will continue to maintain a key focus on to manage sickness in those areas and look to reduce sickness absence as a result. So, Chair, that's a summary of the report that's been provided, and welcome any questions.
Yeah. Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Adrian. Can you tell me what procedures have we got in place for us to keep in contact with members of staff that are on long-term sick that might need extra support in regards to referrals with Lock Health?
Well, the line manager would be required as part of our policy to maintain regular contact with those on long-term sick, Councillor White. In addition, I know that our management of absence advisors are putting in interventions to ensure that happens, that there's a regular engagement with those employees that are on long-term sick.
Yeah, can you indicate what is it? Is it after 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
I couldn't tell you at the moment, Councillor White, but I can certainly send you those details.
You know, I think it's important that if we got a procedure in place that, you know, the line managers must adhere to, that we ensure that it's actually rolled out across the authority, because at the end of the day we have got a duty of care and welfare to our staff, you know.
Yeah.
Just querying if we did have a sort of an actual structure in place, if we know that plus the person is, you know, is off for more than 4 weeks, then how often within that 4 weeks would we contact that member of staff, really?
Yeah, and the answer to your question is that yes, there is a structure in place. I couldn't give you the detail at this very moment.
Okay, thank you.
If I can come in on the back of that, I mean, there's a lot of actions being taken to improve the management of absence across the piece. But for me, it's the report is not giving us sufficient assurance of knowing what difference is being made. So what is the current percentage of absence to what it was previously prior to those actions? Are we adhering to any KPIs that you've met, which Councillor Mike White has alluded to? You know, if you've got targets of a 4-week review, then, you know, what's your compliance for that target? So I think if we have a further update, then I would like that information to be contained in the report, so it will gain us further level of assurance. I know there's a follow-up audit scheduled for March, and I'm hoping our Chief Internal Auditor will look at the KPIs and will include in his report the position before these actions were taken and the position since these actions have been implemented. So Simon, if I can make a plea for you to consider that, because we've not got it in this report.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm not sure if So I'm not sure if the follow-up audit is underway at present. It's due to be completed before the end of the quarter. But yeah, I'll feed that back to the audit team to see if they can include that in their review, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was a similar vein to what you actually have brought up there, and Councillor Mike White. But I can remember having reports with actual figures in there. You know, there doesn't seem to be any information here with regards to you know, how many days are lost and so on. You know, perhaps as a comparative to, you know, last year or the last 6 months or whatever. I must admit, excuse my ignorance as well, this model infusion I don't really know much about. But if we're actually talking about a learning model, are we actually learning that what's causing the sickness and putting measures in place to actually, shall we say, stop people being sick at the end of the day?
Adrian, do you want to come?
Yeah, so Oracle Fusion is the basically it's the updated information system that covers a whole range of our corporate services activities, including human resources and payroll, and that includes the sickness absence module. The learning part of that is the provision of an e-learning tool to support and be able to record completion of mandatory training in respect of sickness absence management. I guess in terms of the detail of sickness absence levels, I can certainly provide that. I didn't. I don't think it was clear that that was part of the remit of this particular committee that I was aware of in that respect, but happy to provide that information. In terms of sickness absence levels across the council, the information that was provided to the Workforce Scrutiny Committee indicated that sickness absence levels were at a rate of 8.11 FTE, 8.11 days per FTE. That is less than the council target of 10 days FTE, and that was the rate that was in place in excess of that prior to COVID. So sickness absence levels have come down since prior to COVID days, but I'm happy to provide some further information on that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Jennifer Rayner.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Thank you. I would like assurance that the change in attitude and direction and process has been shared with all the individual school governing bodies, because they will each have their own sickness policy, and it may be the case they need updating. And in line with that, I noticed the report in paragraph 2.5 refers to provision of additional dedicated clinics for social services staff to minimise the waiting time between referrals and appointments, which I'm sure we're all aware of the problems with the backlog of cases that are built up during COVID. But I know a number of schools have started taking out insurance in order to try and get staff who are sick to be seen much faster than if they were just left waiting for NHS appointments. So can we just look into this? Schools have a large employment area. I know there are insurance schemes some schools take out to cover loss of staff time, to buy an extra staff. But I do feel we've got a very large number of employees who might not be included fully in this good developing scheme that Adrian is reporting on. So I'd like assurance that we have included these arm's length individual schools in the master plan.
Okay. Yes, I'll certainly look into that and report back to you on that.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. That's a very well made point there. Ben Smith, I think you were next.
Mine's a brief one, Chair, just to indicate, I mean, what yourself and a couple of other committee members have already indicated. I'd have been surprised if you hadn't made those observations. I had indicated as your statutory officer that I thought the report was a bit thin and lacking on some of the data that you would want in terms of assurance. But I would equally remind the committee that you've had repeated indications that the service centre is under enormous duress, and you do see that again in this. It doesn't excuse it entirely, and I do get why you've made the comments you've made, and I think that is appropriate by both the committee and yourself as chair. And I will equally be feeding back, but I'm not surprised. I think that's fair and reasonable comment for the committee. And as Mr. Chard has indicated, it's around some of those assurance processes. There are other mechanisms for reporting it through in terms of data. And I think Mr. Chard's assurance is on the softer stuff, as it were, in terms of the core HR stuff. Does give you some assurance, but you do need some data behind it as well to give you that final degree of assurance for the year in question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Councillor Leslie Walton.
Thanks, Chair. Bit of an observation, perhaps a query for Simon. I mean, personally, I think that this report gives me a reasonable sense of assurance. I think the details, it shows it's going in the right direction and that improvements have been made. When it comes down to figures, surely the follow-up, and this is the sort of question directed to Simon, that's when you will be looking at things like figures, because that will then give this report the actual formal backing or not that it is working. So I assume that's the case.
Yeah, do you want to comment on that, Chair?
Yes, please.
Yeah, the follow-up process generically looks at retesting some of the high risk or medium risk recommendations. So whatever is said has been completed in this report will be sort of checked and tested as part of our follow-up review. I'm not sure if the follow-up would ordinarily look at statistics or reduced sickness absence, but I could ask the team to look into that as part of the follow-up. But yeah, we would retest and sort of look at the higher medium risk recommendations to confirm what has basically been said in this report, Councillor Wharton.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for those questions. Ben, do you still want to come in? Your hand is still up.
Apologies, Chair. Legacy hand failure to lower.
Okay, thank you. Julie Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Adrian, I want to draw attention to the excellent work that I've had from personal experience with Helping Hands and the Occupational Health Service, and I wonder whether there are any plans to expand that to ensure that you are supporting existing employees who might be in work but are potentially struggling.
Adrian, do you want to come back on that?
Sorry about that. That sits within the remit of the occupational health team. I can certainly again feed those comments back, Julie. Thank you for those positive comments. It's not within my remit, but as I say, I'll certainly feed that back and ask that question.
Thank you. Okay, I've not seen any more hands up, so thank you, Adrian, for coming to present that report. And as I've said, the devil's in the outcome really for me, and if we can see that information coming through from Simon, that will give some weight to the excellent work that is being done to strengthen and improve the reduction in workforce absence. So I'm happy for you to leave the meeting if you want to, Adrian, and I'm aware of the pressure on the resource with yourself. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
If we can move on to agenda item 7, which is the Audit Wales work programme and timetable. And if I could welcome Non Jenkins from Audit Wales to present this report. Welcome to the meeting, Non.
Very much, and happy International Women's Day to everybody too. So thank you very much for that. I'm Non Jenkins. I think I've met you before. I'm the audit manager for Swansea Council, and Dan King is here too to answer any questions in terms of the financial audit issues. The report that you have before you in your pack, which is item 7 and on page 79, is the latest quarter update in terms of our progress. And progress of our work. So if there are, I'm happy to take you through it. It's very much a quarterly update that we share with the chair, and it's up to the chair if the chairs, if they want to then put them onto the agenda for the audit committees. Happy to take you through. Maybe I will hand over at this point to Dan if he wants to raise anything in terms of financial audit, and then I will come back on anything to do with the performance audit.
Thanks, Non. Yeah, I was just going to sort of give a very brief update, I guess, in terms of our financial audit accounts work. So touching on essentially where we got to last year in terms of the financial statements audit and where we are at currently in looking ahead to the end of this year. So yeah, in terms of the 2021 financial statements audit, we presented our report to committee last September with our qualified audit opinion. Just I guess in terms of an update on the sort of qualification, we've been working with officers since the audit last year to try and remedy the issue ahead of this year. And Ben, Jeff and his team, I think, have been very helpful in supporting us on that front. We're not quite there yet in terms of sort of remedying the issue completely. We've had some delays on our side with Jason Garcia, who I'm sure many of you will remember, left us before Christmas, and our engagement director has actually been on sickness leave the last sort of 6-7 weeks. So appreciate that we're not quite there in terms of resolving the qualification issue at this moment in time, but we are working with council officers at the moment to try and bring that to a close really as soon as possible. In terms of sort of looking ahead to this year, we're sort of in the midst now of our planning work for the 21-22 financial statements audit, ahead of the final audit in the summer. So that's all I was going to say. Non, happy to pass back to you now. I'm happy to take any questions in due course.
Thanks, Dan. And you'll be glad to hear that I'm not going to go through all of the performance audit issues, but just draw to your attention some updates since we've updated this. Obviously, we've nearly completed now our 2021 performance audit work, and in particular, the coming out of COVID work that we've been doing with you and alongside you, which has been a different way of working. And I think both us and the council have valued that, and hopefully we'll be in the position to, well, we're planning to report back to CMC at the end of this month. So hopefully we'll be able to bring to you a summary by the next meeting of that work. So that's the key one, and obviously our ongoing work in terms of assurance and risk assessment is ongoing, and we'll be doing a quick financial position piece of work now over the next month or so now, when budgets across all councils have been set, and we know the forecast for the year coming. And then obviously we need to complete the carbon reduction. We know that you have kindly sent through some evidence already to our call of evidence on our climate change piece of work, and we'll just be looking at that in a bit more detail across Wales and each council, just to understand the good practice and where you're at really in terms of this, because obviously this affects everybody across all public services. So those are the key points really coming out of this. We're finalising at the moment our springing forward work, which is looking this year at workforce and assets, and we'll bring that to the next, hopefully the next Governance and Audit Committee. And we're working alongside the council in terms of your Achieving Better Together transformation work. So those are the key points from the performance audit work. What we try to do in all of this is kind of, because it's a summary, is make sure that we put links in there to the reports that we have reported to you, so that you can click on them. They should be on our website and you can read them at your leisure at whatever time then. But they are there as a reference point so that you can see how and what we have published on our website in relation to you in Swansea, but also across Wales, and also to the Assembly, to the Welsh Government and the Senedd too. So those are the key points. I'm happy to take any questions from yourself.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that. Ben wants to come in, I think. Ben?
Yes, thank you. And I thank my Audit Wales colleagues for the update report and also their frank and honest assessment. In terms of the financial audit work, I mean, the reality is we have an open and transparent relationship on both performance and the finance side, and we're not bashful about saying exchanges of views on matters of opinion. I think Dan has made it quite clear that there have been some gaps on Audit Wales side, and equally we've had gaps. Obviously, the bit that does concern me, given the proximity of year end, that we're not in a position that we've definitively agreed that we see completely eye to eye, does give me some concern. It's just simply a factor of, for the reasons Dan has said, in terms of who hasn't been available. But obviously it's too late at in the year if it weren't resolved. But you know what the main qualification issue is on it. It's a matter of opinion on it, and it'll be for the opinion former to be whoever is the audit manager on site for financial audit and the relevant Audit Wales director. So that's the only bit I need to draw a committee's attention to. Non and Dan are well aware from our discussions that I've made exactly that point. I think it is fair comment, and equally the ball could equally be on the other foot one day with stuff. Things remain very, very stretched, and of course we start from a position of quite high moral standards on these things. So it was a bit of a shock to us last year in terms of where we were at compared to tensions that abound across a number of authorities, particularly across the board, and not so much with Audit Wales, where you see a whole raft of proposals being proposed by my institute and our regulators, where the external audit environment is very challenging for colleagues, as I say, particularly across the border, but they're not without challenges in Wales. And I think my Audit Wales colleagues will recognise those bits. So I thought I ought to at least mention that, Chair, because obviously committee will consider the financial audit a high threshold bar, and there's only 3 weeks or so to the end of the year, so I am a little bit nervous, so I do want to put that on the record. But we're as close as we can be, but obviously it'll depend on the individual players, because it ends up being a formed view and ultimately a recommendation to the Auditor General. So I'll pause there rather than to labour the point. I hope that accords with both Dan and Non's understanding of it, and they don't mind me drawing attention to that. As I say, we've had that frank conversation as officers with Audit Wales colleagues, and I do get the difficulties they face as they do get the difficulties we face. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ben. I can understand why you're feeling uncomfortable, because it was a bit of a shock last year with that opinion issue, and hopefully with the desire to resolve it within the next couple of weeks, that will bring it to its rightful closure. But thank you, Non, and thank you, Daniel, as well, for coming to present this report. Just on the point that Non made with the links in the report to other reports, I did check with Richard Rowlands of the Council whether those reports were being received at other scrutiny committees or panels, and I've had confirmation that there is now a system operating within the Council whereby all reports from any external source, that would be Audit Wales, Estin, CSIW, etc., will all be deposited in the regulators@swansea.gov.uk email, and there will be someone responsible for distributing those reports when they arrive in that inbox to the rightful committees, whether that be scrutiny committee or any other committee that needs to receive those reports. And that gives us confidence that anything coming in that requires action is being targeted and sent to the right people to take that level of action, which is a positive step forward, I think. So again, thank you to all the external regulators for participating in that development within the Council, because that will give us assurance across the piece. I'm not seeing any hands up for questions for our Audit Wales colleagues. So if that's the case, can I thank you again both for coming to the meeting, and thank you for the work that you're doing with Ben and colleagues to try and find a resolution to that particular issue. And if you can keep me updated if there's any delay in receiving some resolution, and if there's any support that I can offer either Audit Wales or Ben, then I'd be happy to do so. So if we can now move on to coming to the end of the meeting. The next item on the agenda is the Governance and Audit Committee paper, which is the tracker. The tracker is where we keep a sort of a oversight of what we've asked other committees or officers to bring back at a future time. I don't know if there's anything in that tracker that members want to raise or query. There's a lot of things there ongoing, but there are dates when we are going to receive those reports or those updates. Unless there's anything there. I'm not seeing any hands raised. If we can move on to agenda item 9, and that's the Governance and Audit Committee work plan. Within that plan, you'll see the work plan that takes us up to April 23, but obviously from May, there may be some changes to that plan because there may be changes post the election. So we'll have to keep that plan under review, and also we'll keep the plan under review post the training that we're going to have, which is going to be supported by Adam Hill in the new responsibilities of the Governance and Audit Committee. So again, unless there are any questions on the plan, Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that the training programme, as requested, will come to the next committee on the 12th of April for just for noting, really, but it'll have more of the detail around what's going to be included in each session, taken from what we did back in, I think it was July 21. And just to say on the forward programme, the update on internal control environment, unfortunately, won't be coming to the 12th because of the senior management review. We've split out what was resources into 2 distinct areas. So we now need to separate those so that you could have that whole year and that reflection, which we won't be able to currently do as a resources because it no longer is a resources. So we need to do a bit of work behind the scenes on that one in order to be able to get that to the committee. So that'll come into the new financial year, sort of a few months in when we've had an opportunity to split those out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adam. Are we going to receive the Swansea Achieving Together update, which is at the April one?
Yes, Chair. As mentioned to you earlier, or should have been signposted to you, Swansea Achieving Better Together update report will be coming as an assurance piece for the end of year. We'll also be bringing the training programme to the next committee also.
Okay, thank you, Ben. If there are no questions, no further questions, no, can I bring the meeting to a close? Julie Davis, sorry, Julie.
That's okay, Chair, thank you. I know from the press that the Council has already done some work in terms of our exposure to anything that's connected with Russia, but could we get some assurance that we have no further exposure in terms of investments or supply of goods and services?
Ben?
I think I perhaps ought to come in, the Chair, and it's difficult. I do get the sentiment from which Julie has raised it. It is a matter that, yeah, we've said what we're doing on the pension fund side. It is a matter we're trying to move in lockstep with the Welsh Government, the UK Government and the Welsh Local Government Association. Julie will be particularly aware, as will other members, that it's incredibly difficult for us just to open up and walk away from a whole raft of public sector procurement arrangements because special rules rightly apply to us. It's certainly live and something that is vexing an awful lot of time, and it's right that the question is asked, but I think that's going to be one not so much for this committee at the moment. I think it will equally concern whole member council, all members of council, and it will be continue to be live, but it's really difficult to give a precise update. It will equally come as no surprise. I've already had questions from the public on those matters in exactly the same vein, and it's obviously understandable why, but it's one that's going to take some while to give that degree of assurance, and certainly in terms of some of the more indirect and oblique linkages, the explicit ones are relatively easy, and that's why we've been able to come out and say what we're doing as of all of the Welsh Local Government pension fund schemes. Again, there is strength in unity, but I do get equally why the question was asked in terms of what are individual councils doing about it. It's about the best I can do at the moment in terms of an update, and I trust the committee will understand why I can't say more than that at this stage, but I do recognise entirely why Julie has raised that point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. I think that's right and proper. It's dealt with and then come back to the committee with any key risks that we've got facing us. On that note then, if I can bring the meeting to a close. Our next meeting is on the 12th of April at 2 p.m. Thank you again for your participation, some excellent engagement, and stay safe, and I shall see you on the 12th of April. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Good up.